Hello and welcome to today's video. This time I've chosen an article about shoplifting and how it has risen to epidemic proportions in the UK. You can read it through with me, paragraph by paragraph, and you can download the text which is in the video description below. And we'll also be looking at some interesting words that we come across as we read. So let's kick off with the first paragraph. The boss of John Lewis has warned that shoplifting is becoming an epidemic in the UK, as the retailer reported a sharp rise in thefts from its stores. Dame Sharon White, the chair of the John Lewis Partnership, said that shoplifting had increased by 35% in the past year, costing the company millions of pounds. She blamed the surge on a combination of factors, including the pandemic, social media, and a lack of police resources. So let's have a look at the first word we have highlighted, which is shoplifting. And to shoplift is basically a form of theft. We can actually see the word theft down here below. And if you commit a theft, that means you steal something. Steal is an irregular verb in English. That's steal, stole, stolen. And basically to steal means to take something that does not belong to you. It belongs to another person. And in this case, the theft takes place in a shop. When somebody takes something, like the person in the photo here, that doesn't belong to them and they don't pay for it, and they put it in their jacket or their bag and they walk out of the shop, that person is called a shoplifter. And the activity is shoplifting. And the article is saying here that shoplifting is becoming a bigger problem. It's a problem that's growing. Let's move on to the second word now, which is retailer. Retailer. And when we talk about retail, what we're really talking about here are the shops and stores that we find on the high street, the shops that you and I might go in if we want to buy a product. This is the retail industry. That's different from wholesale, which is basically where the shops buy their products from. Okay, let's move on to the third word here on this paragraph. We have the verb blame. This is a regular verb, as we can see by the ed ending, and it's pronounced blamed in the past. The article says that she blamed the surge on a combination of factors. So what Dame Sharon is doing here is indicating the causes, possible causes of this increase in shoplifting. And she includes among them the pandemic, social media, and a lack of police resources. So when you blame something, you're basically saying that that is the cause of the problem. You can also, of course, blame a person for something. If you are blaming a person, then you're indicating that person is the source of a problem. Maybe they caused the problem, perhaps they made a mistake, and you say that he or she is responsible for that mistake, then you are blaming them. It's, I suppose, a little bit similar to accuse. It's another verb. When you accuse somebody in a similar way, you're also indicating that a person is responsible. Accuse is more often connected with criminality. So if you're accused of committing a crime, that means the police think that you are the person responsible for that crime. So let's move on to the next paragraph. Shoplifting is not a victimless crime. It affects our ability to invest in our business, pay our partners, and support our communities, she said in an interview with The Times. It also has a huge impact on the morale and well-being of our staff, who have to deal with aggressive and sometimes violent behavior from thieves. She said that shoplifters were becoming more brazen and sophisticated, using social media to coordinate their attacks and share tips on how to evade security. She also said that some shoplifters were exploiting a loophole in the law that allows them to avoid prosecution if they steal goods worth less than £200. So the first word we have in this paragraph is the adjective huge. Huge. So as an adjective, what we're doing here is modifying the word impact. And it's basically saying that this impact is very significant, very large, very big, very important. Because huge is often used as an indicator of size. So if something is very big, we can say it is huge physically, but it's sometimes used, as in this case, to indicate that something is of great importance. It's a big, important problem. If we are describing size, then we can talk about a huge country or a huge animal. We can also talk about huge problems. One huge problem of the world right now is global warming. It's huge because it's such a big problem, it's very difficult to deal with, and it affects many aspects of our lives. The second word we have is morale. Morale. Now, this word is closely associated with organizations like the army. When an army is fighting, then it's very important that their morale is maintained high. They have high morale. Because the morale, in the modern sense, is usually used to describe their psychological state. So if an army has high morale, then they will be in high spirits, they will be feeling very good and very motivated and ready to fight the enemy. In this case, obviously, it's talking about the morale of a different group of people. It's the staff. And the staff are the people who work in a shop, in this case. So it's saying that the continual shoplifting is having a big impact on their morale. It's making them feel very negative and worried about going to work because they are having to deal with aggressive and violent behavior from thieves. So that brings us to the third word here, and I've highlighted the preposition along with the verb deal because they very often go together. You deal with a problem or you deal with a person. And to deal with is basically when you are managing a situation or trying to find a solution to a problem. So if you have a problem, you have to deal with that problem. You have to look for a solution and try to solve it. In this case, in the article, is talking about the staff who are dealing with, they are managing these thieves who are coming into their shops to shoplift. And they have to try to stop them, and they have to call the police, and they have to basically manage a very difficult situation. The next word we have in this paragraph is this word. Now, this is probably the most interesting word in this paragraph, brazen. This is an adjective. As we can see, we're talking about the shoplifters becoming more brazen. So it's an adjective that might describe a behavior or a characteristic of a person. If someone behaves in a brazen way, it means they don't have any regard for the consequences of their actions. Usually they're not embarrassed, they don't feel uncomfortable in any way about that situation, even though the situation might be embarrassing or difficult for the majority of people. The origin of this word is quite interesting. It's related to the word brass. That's B-R-A-S-S. Brass is actually a kind of metal. It's a metal which is formed by combining copper with zinc to make an amalgam. And obviously, as a metal, brass is quite hard. So it has that meaning here that if you're behaving in a brazen way, it's almost as if you're made of brass, you're hard, and you don't feel the impact of your actions. So let's move on to the last word here. Another interesting word, actually, loophole. One of the original meanings of loophole was a very narrow slit window that you often find in castles and other fortifications, whereby archers could fire their arrows at the enemy and be protected from incoming fire. But the modern sense is very different from that, actually. A loophole is really a means of escape. It's a way of escaping or avoiding a law. In this case, there is a law that means if you steal, you will be prosecuted. You will face legal action. However, there is a loophole in the law. There's a means of escape. As the article talks about, if you steal something that is worth less than £200, if it has a value less than £200, then you can avoid legal action. You can avoid being prosecuted. So this is a loophole that many people believe should be closed. This means of escape should be eliminated. So people cannot avoid being prosecuted if they steal from shops. So, by the way, I should tell you that if you're interested in the meaning of words, the study of which is called etymology, I can very highly recommend the online etymology dictionary. I'll leave the link in the video description below. Words like brazen and loophole can be found there, along with many thousands of others. And it's sometimes quite interesting to see where the words come from, how their meaning has changed over history, and indeed how they are linked with other languages too. So let's move on to the next paragraph. We need urgent action from the government and the police to tackle this problem. We need tougher penalties for repeat offenders, more resources for local policing, and a review of the £200 threshold, which is too high and encourages theft. We are determined to fight back against the epidemic of shoplifting. We are not going to let a minority of criminals ruin the shopping experience for our loyal customers and hard-working partners, she said. So the first word in this paragraph is the word tackle. Now, if you are a fan of football, you probably are familiar with this word because it's a word used most commonly nowadays in sport. If you tackle another player in football, that means you try to get the ball from them. So in this case, you're tackling a problem. So it's used a little bit metaphorically, idiomatically. It's not a physical thing that you're taking, but you are, in a sense, taking on this problem and trying to find a solution to it. So there is a connection between the meanings. Sometimes if there is a social problem, the government will have to pass a new law in order to tackle that problem, try to eliminate it. Okay, so the second couple of words here we have is tougher penalties. I put those two together because we have tough, the adjective, and penalty, the noun, quite commonly found together. So the word tough as an adjective is basically similar to hard. So if we're talking about tough situation, it's in some way difficult to manage, it's quite hard. If you commit a serious crime, then the penalty for committing that crime will be very tough. You'll be sent to prison, or you'll have a very large fine. In this case, the article is arguing that the penalties for shoplifting are not tough enough. They need to be tougher. So it's using the comparative there. The next word is threshold. This is another interesting word. The threshold physically is basically the part of the door which is on the floor, and it's the point at which you enter a room. Traditionally, in old houses, this was usually marked by a large stone that was laid on the floor at the bottom of the door, and when you crossed the threshold, you entered the home. Nowadays, the most common use of this is idiomatically. When we talk about a threshold, it's a metaphoric threshold. It's not a physical thing. So it's a crossing point, if you like. In this case, the threshold is £200. This is the point at which, if you cross, you will be prosecuted. And below that threshold, below that point, you will escape prosecution. And the article is talking about the fact that this threshold, this limit, if you like, is too high and should be lowered in order to discourage theft. The final word we have here is the verb let. To let a minority of criminals ruin the shopping experience. So when we talk about letting somebody do something, we are basically, it's another form of allow. We're talking about permission here. So a good context for this is parenting. So when you are a child, you usually have to follow the directions, the rules of your parents. So we can talk about your parents letting you do something, or indeed the opposite, not letting you do something. So when I was a child, I was very lucky because I lived in a small city, and my parents let me play outside with my friends all day. So they didn't know where I was, what I was doing. They were very permissive in that sense. They let me go off on my own. Nowadays, I live in a big city, and when my child was younger, unfortunately, I couldn't let him go out on his own because it was too dangerous. In this case, we're talking about not letting the criminals spoil or ruin the shopping experience. So the person who's talking here does not want to allow them to cause problems. So that's it for today. If you've enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to get news of new videos when I upload them. And thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you again next time.